Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to BLAW Live. So good to be with you tonight. And tell someone that we're here. We have a great discussion tonight. We're going to be talking about women in leadership. We have a series that we're starting to run, and we're going to have different leaders talk about women in leadership, and we're going to have them on. And so we want you to tell somebody to come on. And if you're interested in this subject of women in leadership. If you're a woman and you want to hear from other leaders and to be inspired by them, we want you to let you know that we're on BLAW Live, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So tonight, we are so privileged to have, as I guess, the Reverend Dr. Virginia Ward. And just let me tell you a little bit about her, just in case you don't know who she is. Uh, my wife, Reverend Dr. Virginia Ward. She serves as the Dean of the Boston campus for Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary, right here in Massachusetts. She's also Regional Director for the region. As Dean of the Boston, she conducts oversight over the faculty, but also she's actually in charge of that campus and responsible for what happens on that campus. She also is a book writer. She's an author, and she's produced many books. You can go out there and look on Amazon and find some powerful books regarding youth ministry. She also has some writings that she's going to be publishing very shortly. I'll let her talk about some of those writings that she's doing. She's also a pastor with me, associate pastor of the Abundant Life Church in Cambridge, Massachusetts. She's a leader and she's a coach for DeVos Urban Leadership. She's spoken on many stages, such as Orange and Rethink. And so many different places and spaces, God is using this woman of God to preach and to minister and to write. And so you're going to be blessed tonight as we talk about women in leadership. And also, she's a fantastic wife and mother and grandmother. And so it's awesome to have her with us. Pastor Virginia, how are you?
I'm good. How are you? Good to be here. Thanks for having me on your talk show.
Well, of course, I had to have you as the first one because as we're talking about women in leadership,
Mhm.
you're out there just really being an example and a model for women and men when it comes to
Mhm.
leadership. So we certainly are blessed to have you. I just want to make a statement for those of you who are listening, and that when it comes to women in leadership, this is a very certainly a touchy topic. It has a lot of theological debate behind it. And my point of view is this: is that when God has called a person, that He calls them, and whether they're male or female, we are one in Christ. And when I'm reading the scriptures, I acknowledge that when it comes to the Bible and you're reading about leadership, you predominantly see men in leadership, men in predominant roles of leadership, being kings, being priests, being prophets. There are certainly some uh, leaders that are in the Old Testament that were women that did some incredible things, whether it's Deborah or Huldah. You see those prolific figures that come out when it comes to leadership. In the New Testament, you see leaders like Priscilla. You see leaders like Phoebe, who was a deaconess in the church, and so God used women in many different capacities. Queen Esther in the Old Testament was a powerful woman to intercede on her behalf of her people. But we also have to acknowledge that Paul also talks about, this: I suffer a woman not to teach. I suffer a woman not to be in leadership. And so we have these tension points of, should women be in leadership? Should they pastor? Should they not pastor? Should they be in a place where they can be responsible or give oversight in some way, shape, or form, especially in the church? And so there's a lot of tension points. Where I stand on it as a pastor, and I believe that God has endowed people who He calls and people who's chosen. He endows them with gifts. He endows them with capabilities. But also, I realize that as I'm reading the scriptures, I'm reading the Bible. It's written many times and historically from a patriarchal lens. That it was patriarchal. That so when you're starting to look at it, of course, men occupied a lot of those positions because it was a patriarchal society. But we get into New Testament, Jesus did some incredible things where he went against the grain of the society. Imagine how people felt when he went to Samaria and sat down beside a woman. A woman in Samaria sat by her in their well. It's crazy to even think that he would even sit by a Samaritan woman, first of all, and a woman at that sitting by her by a well. So he broke many of the rules that society had placed upon women for himself. So he invited women alongside of his entourage, so that when he rose from the dead, he told these women who really came and sought him where the disciples were hiding. He said, "Look, you're the one that getting the message. You know, Mary, that Mary and the mothers and those who came around that were around Jesus that loved him. They took the message. The women took the message to the men who were hiding behind closed doors." So God does not have, and Jesus does not have anything against women who are called to do his work. So I just want to make that disclaimer before we get into our questions tonight. All right. So I want to invite you also that if you have a question, you have a thought, please use the chat box. We'll be able to see your question. And so we're going to give you a chance to do that. And if you have a question right up front, don't delay, put it in the chat box so that we can answer your question, because we do only have about half an hour to actually share with you. So without further ado, I want to ask Pastor Virginia, Dr. Ward, a question. First of all, when it comes to leadership, what is your definition of leadership?
Great question. So one of the definitions that I really adhere to, it's actually twofold, and they come from the same person. So, and probably somebody else may have said it as well, but John Maxwell has a statement that leadership is influence. So I think that is definitely one of, I would say, part A of my definition of leadership. Then the part B would be a three-pronged approach that he says, that a leader is one who knows the way. So there's a visionary aspect to it, where the leader can see where to go, knows the way. I'm sorry, I'm getting a little bit of feedback here, so I just wanted to make sure. Is it just me getting that feedback? Okay. So a leader is one who knows the way. So first has clear vision and is able to see the way to go. But not only does a leader see the way to go, knows the way to go, a leader is also one that goes the way. So they don't just say, I see that's the way, you do it. They also go. They're also walking alongside and living and following that vision out. Then the third part that John Maxwell talks about is a leader is one who shows the way. A leader is one who helps other people to do it as well. So not only do they know it, the way, not only do they show the way, but they're also able to help others along in that space. So that's kind of like my A and B definition of leadership that I like to live by.
Yeah, I agree. Leadership is influence. It is important that we know that as leaders, we do have the responsibility to use our influence in a very, very wise and important way. So now that we know that leadership is influence, what does it take to be a good leader from your vantage point?
Well, one more piece I want to add with that leadership definition is that I also, since we're not just talking about leadership from a natural perspective, we're also talking about a spiritual aspect of leadership. And so I also think that as a good leader who's a Christian, as a woman of faith, that a good leader is also one who can hear from the Spirit and then implement what they hear. And by implement, I don't mean doing leadership on people, but working with people. So I think a good leader is one who can hear from the Spirit, hears from the people they're working with, can receive feedback, whether it's positive or negative, criticism, can even receive rebuke, and then process it and be able to make the necessary correctives and keep growing in leader. I think a leader who's not growing and learning to receive feedback and making changes and progressing, I don't consider that person a good leader.
Oh, that's very important. Absolutely. So when it comes to leadership, you have a number of things that you actually do. And as they say, you have a lot of fires in the iron. or a lot of irons in the fire, right?
Into the fire.
Irons in the
Yeah.
fire, right? You have a
Yeah.
lot of things happening. You
Hmm.
gotta have these
Hmm.
multi leadership responsibilities. So how do you balance your work and your life responsibilities? How do you balance that?
Mm. Well, you've seen this firsthand. So um, I when I first started out in leadership and in ministry, I would bite off more than I could chew. I have to admit, I'm a doer. I like to do. I like to get things done. I have a checklist, and I love it when I can just check that box and ooh, that's done. Ooh, that's done. Ooh, that's done. And so as we added to our family, first when it was just me and you, that was one thing. As we added kids, then different things had to come off my plate. I had to learn that my home is first. I didn't want my kids, and we didn't want our kids to suffer because of ministry. We didn't want them to hate God and hate Jesus and hate the church and not come to know who he was because we were so focused on the church. So I was intentional about balancing myself as a person. I like to shop, I like to look good, I like to feel good. So I there's self-care time, there's spiritual care time. I remember reading a book moons ago called Feeding Your Forgotten Soul by Paul Borthwick, which really challenged me to spiritually make time for my soul. So I didn't want to just do lessons and teach and preach and Sunday school and youth ministry, but be doing it from a dry well. And so I'm intentional about spending time with God. So and then also spending time with you, it's my husband, my spouse, and then with family, and then having time for friends. So balancing all of that, it is at times feels like juggling, a little over here, a little over there, a little over there, but there's a lot of intentionality to it. So I'm a big planner schedule person. So I need to write it down. I have to have a schedule. I need to look at my schedule. I need to see what I'm doing for the month. Then I break it down to the week. Then I break it down to a day. So I can say, okay, I got this done today, or I didn't get this done. I got to shift this along. And then if I can't get to something in a certain time frame, it's just got to wait until I get back to it. I'm not going to sacrifice my sleep. I'm not sacrificing my health. I'm not sacrificing my family time. I've been there, done that. I learned the hard way how to balance things. And so as a result, I'm okay with knowing that I'm a limited person and I have limited amount of time. There's only 24 hours in a day. I get the same 24 hours everybody else gets. So I've learned how over time to balance. I didn't start out that way, but I've learned over time to balance.
That's great. Your balancing act is pretty amazing. As I started to watch it, I said it's just amazing how you do that. But I have a question that we're going to
Mm-hmm.
kind of start diving into, particularly women in leadership. Question
Mm-hmm.
is, as a woman in leadership, do you find it harder to lead men or women, and why so?
It depends. It depends on the man or the woman. So, I would say initially, until I learned, and forgive me, uh, I was gonna call you Hannah. Can I call you Hannah on the show? You are my husband, so Bishop. No disrespect. I've initially, when I first started in leadership, it was difficult to learn how to lead men until I understood what the good old boys club was about and how I had to really understand, position myself to learn and understand men. And you helped me with a lot of that because I could ask you questions and say, why do men do this? And why do men do that? The other piece was having two sons. So being in a house where it's male dominated, I had to learn, and I learned like, oh, that's just a guy thing. And I learned not to take things personally. So once I learned and really started to study and understand men, and it became easier to lead men. Women, on the other hand, even though I am a woman, there are some women who are very difficult to lead. And I find that, especially if that woman has been hurt by women before or is really broken internally, there's a lot of masquerading. There's a lot of, they make it difficult. It's almost like they throw obstacles in your way intentionally. And women, we're very skilled at masquerading and blocking some things. And so some women make it difficult to lead. But again, being a woman, generally when I encounter that, I know that she's hurting. I know that she may need a little bit more time to be able to be properly led. And if she'll allow me and we work together, I've really turned some women who were adversaries to me. We've really become great friends and comrades once we learned how to work together.
Wow. I'm just amazed that, that you do find women sometimes are harder to work with than men. Wow.
Yeah, well, again, I think it's the brokenness. And I realize that, like, some women, they'll say, oh, you're intimidating, or it doesn't take all of that, or they just come up with things. And I've often found out, from most of the time, from these women, they've been hurt by other women before, and other women have bulldozed over them, or didn't see them, or disregarded them, or made them feel like they were less than. So if they've dealt with a lot of rejection in the past, then they have a difficult time when another woman comes, especially if that woman's strong, or if they're older, like some older women, they look like, who are you? You're younger than me. How are you in this position? Why do you get to do this? And I'm like, I didn't ask for this. The Lord invited me in and I said yes. So maybe if you accept some of the invitations of the Lord and say yes, he'll do the same for you, or not the same, but he'll do for you what he wants to do. So that's been difficult. But brothers, it's a whole nother can of worms. But for men, and I'm glad you said what you said in the beginning, especially on the church side, I do encounter some issues with men, especially on the clergy side. Some men can't see me, or they just see me as a woman. And so I don't fight. I don't, I'm a woman. I don't fight. I just allow them to be who they are. For instance, is a quick story. I was a coach. I've served as a coach for DeVos, or I should say for a DVULI, for a youth ministry training program for youth workers. And I had to coach a male youth worker. He was the city coordinator. And he was one of those, and he actually said to me, I don't know how I feel about you as a woman leading me. And so I'm like, okay. So I just let it rest. And at night, the group was going out to do something, and he had planned this whole evening, but the group didn't want to do what he wanted to do. So they approached me, and then I went to him and I just said, they don't want to do that. They want to do something different. And he said, well, that's not what I want to do. I already made plans. And I said, well, again, you're the city coordinator. You can make the decision. I'm just letting you know what your group decided, what they would like to do. You can ultimately make the decision. You are the city coordinator. And he said, well, if I don't listen to you, what are you going to do? Are you going to fall on the floor? And I said, no, that's what a kid would do. And he said, what are you going to do? Beat your chest? I said, no, that's what an ape would do. I said, I'm not that. He said, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to tell you and allow you to make the decision as a woman, because that's what a woman would do. And I just turned and walked away. So a few minutes later, he came over to me and he just stood beside me, and then he announced to the group, I hear there's a change in plan. So we'll do something different. We're going to go. They wanted to go bowling and then get ice cream. So we went bowling and then got ice cream. And so when I got to the counter, he paid for my ice cream. That was his way of saying he was sorry. So, it was just like, I didn't fuss at him about it. I just kind of chuckled inside, like, yeah, I just had to be a woman, and he was good.
Wow. Yeah, it's amazing how sometimes as a woman is leading, they can trip people up a little bit, just because they're leading, and when the expectation is they shouldn't be. We're getting into a kind of really a time crunch, so I'm gonna kind of what I call throw it into what I call acceleration a little bit. For those that are listening who are emerging leaders, and you maybe have some women who are emerging leaders, and they're young leaders, or they're now in position of leadership, and they're seeking positions that have authority, and actually are able to do some very significant things and make contributions. What would you say to them about leadership that can really help them as they're just coming into what I call the land of where no person has gone before in some cases, or they haven't been there before, so they don't really know? What would you say to them?
Right. Well, I would say, first of all, know who you are. So there are tons of assessments out there where you can start to look at and examine, how do you lead? How do you like to get things done? How do you like to receive information? Because the better you know who you are, Most people would just say to you, be who you are. And I'm like, yeah, that's easy if you know who you are. So I think first step is discover who you are. Then after you discover who you are, then be that person. Don't try to be somebody you're not. And then thirdly, I would encourage you to try to get a mentor. And that mentor may not exactly be in your field, but that mentor could be another woman who's had to carry the weight of leadership, especially finding other women who are ahead of you in that leadership journey, who can say, baby, look out for this, or sister girlfriend. And so when you go, well, they can go, and they can also share their war stories with you. They can show you their wounds and say, this cut was from ... This cut was from. So I think that's important. Though I would say those three things to a woman who is starting to grow in leadership so that she can progress on her journey.
Okay. When it comes to this role of leadership that you have particularly, how does your faith connect with what you do every day as it relates to being a woman in leadership?
Mm-hmm. Well, I can tell you this is quite a faith journey. Working with Christians, I think it takes even more faith than working with non-Christians. Because non-Christians, you know where they're coming from. They don't know Jesus. So you can say they don't know Jesus. So you can just drop it all in that bucket. But when you're working with Christians, especially from people from varied denominations and viewpoints, and then add another layer to it, I'm working with theologians and people just know what God says. And so my faith, it requires me to really be in a prayerful and in a discerning space, to have my ears tuned, to listen and to pause and to suspend my own assumptions and my own judgments, and to really listen with the ear of the Spirit, and to literally be quick to listen and slow to speak. And that's hard for me because I like to tell you what I'm thinking. So it's really my faith in God's going to speak, my faith in this is a work of God. It's not me to do in my own strength. It is a work of the Spirit. So my faith in God is what really helps me to say, the body's going to come together. God's going to work all of this out. And I'm a vessel to be used by him.
Wow, that's awesome. And so as we're thinking about this whole series about leadership and women in leadership, what are the things that are concerning to you in this day and time for women who are leading? What are your deepest concerns about women in leadership?
My deepest concerns are, one, I think even though you're seeing a lot of women in leadership in different positions politically, socially, in the healthcare industry and education, we're still isolated. So I'm very concerned about the isolation that I'm seeing with women. So it seems like the more women are rising, it's still the silos haven't come down. And I would really like to see us crossing the disciplines and having more conversations and building a network and more connections. I know that there are networks out there. I still believe they're siloed. They're siloed by discipline. They're siloed by age sometimes. So all the young adults are hanging together, and then all the older people are hanging together. So it's not necessarily intergenerational. Then by race, so we're by ethnicity. And so I would like to, that concerns me, that we are not as connected as we need to be as far as women. Secondly, what concerns me is that with the Me Too movement and just some men have become afraid to share knowledge and to really even participate in that mentoring process. And so that concerns me as well, that will add to isolation, but also limit the places naturally, spiritually, that women could go because we're missing information.
Wow, that's insightful. That's very insightful and helpful. I have a question in the chat that person would like to know. First of all, have you been accused? They're asking, have you been accused of being too emotional or too angry? And how did you handle that?
Have I been accused? I have not. I haven't been accused of being too emotional. But the angry side of angry, compassionate, angry Black woman, and because I've actually tried very hard to not be accused of being an angry Black woman. But it's hard when you're passionate about something and when you're in certain environments that as a Black woman, because I am more passionate and I say what I mean and mean what I say, that people, I get accused of, oh, you're intimidating. What do you mean? What does that mean? Um, so I have been accused of that. And for me, I pause. And again, I do inner reflection, and that's part of my self-care, but also inner reflection. What did I say? Could I have said it better? What were the words? And I'm intentional about the words that I use. And I will ask others, well, did that come across too? So I've learned how to have accountability people in every meeting where I'm side messaging and asking people questions. And I just take it and I look at it. And if it's for me, I make the necessary adjustments. And if it's the other person and they just couldn't hear it, couldn't handle all of the flair, then I just leave it there. I've learned not to be so easily offended and take it personally, but I do reflect upon it so that I can make the necessary adjustments as needed.
Well, thank you. Next question. How do you engage other women who do not believe that women should be in leadership? It's one thing to have a man believe that, yet completely different thing when a woman believes that.
I've had students in my class say that to me. They don't believe in women in leadership. I honor and I let them know I respect their opinion. I also let them know that I didn't ask for these gifts. I didn't make these gifts. And so I just generally would ask them, why would God give me something and not ask me to use it and not require of me to use it? And then judge me for it on Judgment Day when I stand before him and then say, Virginia, you didn't use that gift I gave you. I called you to lead others. I called you to, and you didn't use it. Well, I didn't use it because I'm a woman. It's not an excuse. And so I respect their opinion on that, but I don't let that hinder me from doing, because at the end, I want to hear him say, well done, good and faithful servant. And so those women generally, I've had them in class. I've had men in class with that opinion as well. And I respect their opinion, but I don't let it hinder me from doing what I'm called to do. I don't want the regrets. I've talked to people who've had regrets about not doing what the Lord asked of them, and I don't want that.
Oh. And with that, I want to ask you probably one final question. So we have about 3 minutes. We're now in a place. We're now in a place where we've seen on pay scales that men are doing the job of leadership in a particular position are getting paid a certain amount, and then a woman would come in to that same position and she would get paid sometimes significantly less. What do you say about that?
It annoys me to no end. I brought it up. I brought it up with employers. I've had the conversation even in the places where I frequent, and there are no excuses for it. It annoys me to no end that some people, I've had answers when I've asked about it. I've had some say, well, he's a man and he has certain responsibilities. And I'm like, well, I'm a woman and I have certain responsibilities. And until men pause and really get to the root of why that bias is in place, then it's not going to change. So that annoys me to no end. It's unfortunately still going on, and it's going to, even in the church. And so, as you know, and this one quick story, it might take us over. I was invited by a church to preach a 3-night revival, and you went with me, and the boys were small at the time. We took the boys with us as well. 3 nights at this church. They took a speaker's offering every night. At the end of the revival, they handed me a card, some flowers, and a plaque. And when I got home and opened up the card was empty. So I called my friend and said, hey, this card is empty. I just want you to know there was nothing in it. You're mailing it afterwards. You took a speaker's offering every night. I just want you to know. And he said to me, oh, we don't pay women speakers. I was like, excuse me, you told the people, you took a speaker's offering every night. I watched you take it. You told the people, come on, let's bless the speaker. Let's bless the speaker. You knew the speaker was a woman. You invited me in. And he said, well, that's just our custom. We don't pay women speakers. And so I said, okay, God bless you. And just chalked it up to, okay, Lord, that you asked me to do it. I was obedient. About a month later, they called me and they said, the people really want you to come back. Would you come back and speak for us again? So now I'm conflicted because I already know that you unethically took an offering, told the people the offering was for the speaker, and you gave me a plaque and some flowers. Thank you. I appreciate the flowers and plaque. And so I just said to them, I'm not available because I'm not going to co-sign your system. And so he called me back again. And I said, I'm not available those dates. On the third time when he called me back, he said, you're not coming back because we don't pay women, aren't you? And I just said, well, your system is not ethical. And so I cannot co-sign that system at this time.
Bravo. and I said bravo to that too.
Yes.
And I had to tell him about that too, because I believe that it should be, the pay should be comparable for the worker. The person who's working is worthy of their hire. And
yes.
that's scriptural. If they're working, they're worthy of their hire. So you need to make sure that they are accommodated as best you can, and also looking comparables and making sure that they're paid adequately. Okay. So, well, thank you so much. We're a little bit about 1 minute over. For those of you who are listening, I appreciate you coming on BLAW Live at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Tell somebody again, subscribe to our channel, and just let others know that we're talking about women in leadership. Thank you again, Reverend Dr. Virginia Ward, my lovely wife, for doing this.
Thank you.
First one. Thank you so much. Thank you to Tony McGrath, who's really helping us with the technology and making sure that this BLAW Live gets aired and shared with you. And so with that, we say goodbye. May the Lord bless you. May the Lord keep you. May the Lord cause his face to shine upon you. May the Lord be gracious unto you and give you his shalom, his peace, nothing missing, nothing broken. Until we meet again, this is Bishop Larry Ward, BLAW Live. See you next Tuesday